occurred. I am calling the June 12, 2023 special meeting of the Lemon Tribee to order. We had met as the one that we had earlier at 5 o'clock this afternoon on Main Street to review one of the applications. So we convened and we're re-upping it. So, Jesse, you can make roll call, please.
Yes, Mayor Wilson. Roll call, Chair Roth.
Here.
And Vice Chair Holly Madrigal is absent by prior arrangement, and same for Alan Sanders and Home Kepler.
Here.
Here.
And for the record, we have planning staff here with us today. We have Mark Kleisers who will be presenting, myself, Jesse Waldman. We have Code Enforcement Officer Gretchen McLaughlin, who is also presenting, as well as Julia Cropp.
Thank you. In terms of the agenda, if we're going to move things around, when's the appropriate time to do that?
I believe now would be an appropriate time.
Okay. If it's okay with you, gentlemen, I'd like to move our code enforcement item, which is 11A, to come after, I guess, come right before our public items. So it'll be after 8A. Good with that?
You're saying?
Moving code enforcement up in the agenda. Out of consent.
Sure.
Do I need a motion to? Okay, so we're going to do it then. All right. Do we have appropriate determination of legal notice?
Yes, we do have proper notice. Thank you.
Then thank you. The minutes from the March meeting, May meeting. Do we have any corrections from our board members?
I just had a couple of minor changes that I already gave to the staff. The only one of any consequence at all is that under call to order, I think we need to note that Chair Roth was not present at the site visits.
That's good. Issue? Any corrections?
Nope.
I've got a couple minor ones. Under 11A, I know I wasn't here, but I did watch the last meeting. Calling me crazy. Under public comment, under 11A, I don't believe Deidre Lamb, which was not spelled quite correctly, was here to make public comment, but she definitely had something under written comments. And I do recall Tony Graham came up after all the public comments and had a second one about the satellite seating. I don't know if that needs to be mentioned or not, because he's already in the public comment.
I'm sorry, I missed, I didn't hear it.
So Deidre Lamb submitted written comment, but she wasn't here for public comment, so I'd like to strike that from the record. And Tony Graham put forth a comment about satellite seating. The state bill.
Oh, assembly bill.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's right.
I misheard you.
I know that you were up for public comment, that you came up the second time. I don't know if that should be mentioned or not. But.
Okay.
So, may I?
Yeah.
For the record, you would like to scratch Deirdre Lamb's name from the public comment section, as well as add a separate paragraph that Tony Graham added comments about the assembly bill for seating.
That's fine. We're lead to note. Motion to approve minutes is amended.
Motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. All right. There we go. Do we have any correspondence that's been received for items not on the posted agenda?
No, we do not.
Okay. Agenda item number 6, report from chair. I don't have anything to report other than it's good to be back. Agenda item number 7, public expression. So, board welcomes participation for public who have comments on items not on the agenda. So we'll get 3 minutes per person. Now we're in the 10 minutes for subsequent agenda items so that everyone can be heard. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on something that's not on the agenda? Please approach the podium and give us your name for the record, please.
Thank you. My name is Randy Mendoza, and I wanted to say a few things about Mills Act. I know the Historic Review Board sent a letter to the Board of Supervisors back in November to recommending that the board consider that. So I was very pleased to hear that because, our father passed away about a year ago, and my brother Mitch and I inherited his home, which has been the family home since we grew up in. And it's for the fourth generation that lived in this historic home. It was built by my grandmother's aunt and uncle in 1911, so it's a historic structure. So we're very interested in the Mills Act because we're not sure we're going to be able to afford keeping it once it's reassessed. I've got 2 kids in college, and so it's I'm retired, my brother's retired. So we're very interested in that. So that was in November, so I sent an email to Supervisor Williams, and then he contacted Julia, and thank you for your response. And I don't know if he copied you, if he sent a separate email to you, you offered him to see if he would sponsor the Mills Act to the board. So I haven't heard from him, so I sent him a follow-up email in January 26th to see if he would, we can get anywhere on that, and I still haven't heard anything from him. So on April 11th, I zoomed in on the webinar and did a public expression to the full board of supervisors, and I haven't heard anything back. So I'm here today, since it started here, it's a great idea. And I thought that maybe if this board, I understand you can't discuss it tonight, it's not an agenda item, but if this board would consider maybe putting it on the agenda again, or if I could talk with a couple of you, to get ideas. I'm a retired city manager. I understand what it's like when you have lots of people coming forward. I understand staff, is swamped. I truly understand, but I really, truly believe that as someone who grew up in Mendocino, I literally went to the first and second grades in this very room. It would be good public policy to have a Mills Act program here, because, it's changing, how can you, with the prices in Mendocino, I couldn't afford it, that's why I moved away. I couldn't afford to live in Mendocino, when I started out. So I have my, I can give you my address. I know Julie has my contact information, but I'm just, as I said, we're just trying to get some traction here to see if we get the attention of the board of supervisors. And it seems like it might be helpful if the Historic Review Board, maybe we can work together somehow to at least get it on their agenda to be considered. Thank you very much.
I have too much of it at home because this was your pet project. Do you want to make some comment?
I think I was the one who raised it here before, and the result of our discussion was that I believe we sent a message to the Board of Supervisors recommending that the supervisors strongly look into the idea of establishing a Mills Act program. Of course, it wouldn't just apply to the town of Mendocino, but it would apply to the whole county. I'm very much in favor of establishing such a program. I'm just not sure what this board can do other than what we've done so far.
The question to staff, did that letter get to the board of Supes?
Yes.
And do you know if they've taken any action as a result?
We would have been included, our office would have been, and so we have not been contacted. I think Randy was part of my email exchange with Supervisor Williams at the time, asking if he wanted to sponsor an item to the board, in which case we would provide staff support for that item. But I haven't heard anything more in the recent months.
Well, Randy, you're welcome to take it up with our board member.
Can I give my contact information?
Sure.
Thank you very very much.
Thank you. Mr. Sachs? Connected.
Rick Sachs, can you explain what this Mills Act is? Please?
Do you want to do that one?
Pardon?
Explain what the Mills Act is?
Mills Act is a program that a number of municipalities, counties in California have taken advantage of, which allows owners of historic houses to receive a break in terms of their property taxes if they maintain the house to certain standards, and I believe they have to open the property once a year to people who are interested in historic preservation. So it encourages historic preservation. At the same time, it gives some property tax relief to the owners of historic houses. And certainly, there are a lot of historic houses in this town, and I would have thought that a lot of people in this town would be interested.
Thank you.
And I don't believe it costs the county anything.
Lost
revenue. Some lost revenue.
So there, that's why the supervisors will not pursue this policy.
Anyone else wishing to make comment on anything that's not on the agenda this evening? Okay. Have we had any mail or email requests for public expression?
Not for any items not on the day.
Great. Consent calendar, we don't have any items, which brings us to 11A, matters from the staff, which has to be our code enforcement for the town of Mendocino activity report.
Good evening, Chair and board members. My name is Gretchen McLaughlin. I'm currently the acting code enforcement manager with Building Services. And tonight I will be providing you an update on the code enforcement activity for the town of Mendocino as of up to date of May 2nd, which is the date of this report. So we're about a month behind from the time that I generate this report from when we're reporting out. So some of it's a little moot, but it is still contains some valuable information. So the last report was conducted March 6th, 2023 at the MHRB meeting. During that time, because we had such a big lapse in time, I broke it down into 2 separate years for last year and then the current year. So section 2 will kind of incorporate where we are at with closed cases from the 2022 year, which includes we closed a complaint regarding security cameras and exterior lights that were not approved in the 45,000 block of Little Lake Street. The property owners did work with our planning staff to make some modifications that were approved to our planning staff, and so that case was subsequently closed. We also had a previous complaint for tinted windows associated with a previous approved historic review board permit, and we were able to get that updated as well, and they have the appropriate building permits for those windows, and so that case was closed as well. And then moving into this year, we received 22 complaints total so far as of that date. 3 of them were closed, and they included, for the general lump sum, was a short-term rental. We received 1 complaint in the 45,000 block of Ukiah Street. The property owner did agree to cease the non-approved use and took everything down from the website, so we were able to get that one closed. We received a complaint for concrete work in the 45,000 block of Albion Street, and that one's still pending investigation. I believe primarily because we believe they were replacing existing pathways, but we're still trying to get a determination from planning staff on that. 1 complaint was received for garbage cans that were located in the roadway in the 45,000 block of Calpella Street. No violation was confirmed at the time that we did do a site inspection, because we still will. However, I do want to remind the public and the board that if the potential violation exists on a public right-of-way, code enforcement does not have jurisdiction. That would actually fall within Department of Transportation. So we do work really well with them, and we do forward those complaints to them. But in terms of whether or not anything would go through, it would really be under their purview. We also had 2 complaints regarding fences exceeding the height of 42 inches in the 44,000 block of Albion Street and the 45,000 block of Cotta Street. And those are currently under review pending investigation. We had 6 complaints total for various lights complaints, including 2 duplicates in the 45,000 block of Ukiah Street, in the 10,000 block of Lansing Street, and the 10,000 block of Outlet Drive, and 10,000 block of Ford Street. And those are all pending investigation. We had complaints regarding 2 complaints for wine barrels, I believe at the same location, along with non-conforming signs along the public right-of-way and in front of the building in the 45,000 block of Ukiah Street, and those are currently under investigation. We had 3 sign complaints, primarily for sandwich board signs in the 45,000 block of Albion Street, and those are pending investigation. And I would like to add some commentary towards the end of this, a little update regarding signage as well. That's not on this report. We had 4 complaints regarding tents, which we will be working with the director's press release. In the 10,000 block of Caston Street, 44,000 block of Albion Street, and 2 in the 10,000 block of Lansing Street. And those are currently pending investigation, which will also pend from when the time lapse is on the notice that the director put out. We have 1 complaint regarding a camper van in the 45,000 block of Little Lake Street. It was determined to be actually a Sprinter van, which was also somebody's daily driver, so we were not able to substantiate a violation under this circumstance, so that case was closed. And then we had 1 complaint of a tiny home on wheels located in 10,000 block of Lansing Street, and when we did our investigation, it was determined to be a mobile sauna, and it was removed upon request, and that place is closed as well. So the one little thing I would like to just bring to your attention, since this report, and it's going to pop up in the next report, we did receive several complaints regarding non-permitted signage throughout the town of Mendocino, like over 30. So code enforcement will be coming up with a strategy to address all of those complaints, along with the various different kinds of signage, like sandwich board signs, neon signs, too much signage in a window, as well as just general signage if they have too many and whatnot. So we're going to come up with a strategy to do that, and we also came up with a pamphlet that hopefully will get approved to also be an informational guide to the public as well. So.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We get these, it's great to have these on a quarterly basis, and what I'd like for the public to know, especially since we're being recorded, you come from MHRB for permission, and after that, if you don't come for permission or you violate, then that's where code enforcement gets involved. So we're kind of 2 different arms of the same piece, but thank you for doing the work.
They add another statement to that.
Yeah.
It's always encouraged for you to ask permission ahead of time too, because it doubles your fees if a code enforcement violation is confirmed.
So permission's a lot cheaper than...
Exactly.
Yes. Mr. Sellers.
What does pending investigation mean? Who does the investigation, and why are there so many of these in that category?
So we have 1 code enforcement officer assigned to the coast. Because he has such a long, wide range of locations to cover, from all along the coast down to Walala, up to Westport, or even further, we really have to be able to come up with a strategy to address a lot of signage complaints. We don't have control over the complaints that come in. So when we get a lot of them like this, we try to filter that into our regular priorities to address various complaints that we're responsible for. So when it's saying pending investigation, it means that we're going to address it, we just haven't gotten there yet.
please.
Please, if you do have comments, please come up to the podium so that we can properly hear what your questions and or concerns are. Thank you.
Anything from the board for code enforcement? No directions to staff, just come back every quarter and thank you.
I'm glad to be here.
Great. All right, get out of here.
All right, thank you.
Brings us to agenda item number 9A, our first public hearing item, which is presentation of 2023 Major Vehicle Award outlines. So, this is for restoration of the carriage house at the Jerome House, a Category 1 historic resource located at 45-150 Powell Street by owner Eliana Lilani Unida, contractor Wind Spirit Lawn, and architect Kelly Grimes. MHRB 202-0007. Is there someone here to receive the award? No. The award is as such. So, can I give it to staff? First of all, thank you for your support. Thank you, guys. And maybe get the applicant to come over and say thank you to the staff.
We will deliver.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We go to 9B, which is public hearing, case number MHRB 2023-0004. Sad. And this is a Minister Review Board request for a 3.5 square foot single face wood sign, in white background, black lettering, and red, blue, green, yellow accents, sign copy of DBL Architect. Mr. Kleiser, would you
Yes,
like to?
thank you, Mark Kleiser, Planner 2, planner for this project, and I'd like to request that this item be continued until after the discussion of the sign exemption draft policy.
That sounds fine. Which I should remember because you said that part of this is based upon that.
Correct.
Exactly. So we're going to continue this item until afterwards. Brings us to agenda item number 10, matters from the board members. Do either of you have any issues that you'd like to bring up?
Nothing for today.
All right. Which brings us to, back to Planner Kleiser, right? Up to getting your steps in.
Okay, Planner Mark Kleiser, and I'm presenting today a draft policy for a sign copy exemption for commercial signs. So in 2021, the board requested that staff prepare a policy regarding Mendocino County Chapter 20.760.040H specifically. That section states, copy changes on legally existing signs are exempt from Chapter 20.760, provided that the Planning and Building Services Department has determined that the replacement or revised sign, 1, conforms to size and design standards contained in this chapter and Chapter 20.712, 2, is similar in color and design to the original sign, 3, is not larger than the original sign, and 4, is in the same location on the property as the original sign. So this draft policy attempts to do that. In this policy, what staff would like to propose is the typical condition of approval that has been appearing in sign permits, which reads, let me find that language. That condition read, this permit for this sign is valid only for as long as this business is conducted at this location. The review board reserves the right to consider all aspects of any future changes to the sign, including signs. At the review board's direction, when appropriate, staff suggests the following conditions instead of that one. Those conditions would be telephone numbers, web addresses, social media contacts, for example, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and similar, are not allowed to appear on sign. Replacement signs shall be the same shape and size and similar in color, brightness, tone, and hue. Fluorescent, metallic, iridescent, or otherwise modern colors shall be avoided. Replacement signs shall be in the same location on the property. And the last condition, alterations or copy changes to approved signs shall be brought to the attention of planning and building services prior to any changes. So the sample procedure would be a sign exists on a property, the business is gone, the new owner comes in and wants to replace the sign in the same location adhering to these conditions. Then they would bring to Planning and Building Services an 8x11 color rendering of the proposed sign. The rendering shall identify the sign colors, size, shape, and copy. At that time, planning staff will determine whether the proposal satisfies the regulations or conflicts with MHRB permit conditions. Those permit conditions, for example, might be a person's coming in to change that sign. If the previous sign was permitted with the old condition that said this sign is for this business only, that business owner would need to get a permit. When that permit is issued, that condition will be removed. The new conditions that I just read will be put on it, and future business owners will be able to come to Planning and Building Service, present this 8.5x11 sign, and if it's determined by planning and building staff that it adheres to all the standards in the code, we will give them the permit for this. Allow them to put up the sign. That will be kept in the address folder in Fort Bragg office.
So what you're saying is that it's not retroactive, it's proactive going forward?
Exactly, yes.
Got it.
I'm a little confused by that. So if somebody is opening a new business, and there's a location where there's been signs in the past, and they want to put up a sign that conforms to our code, it's 6 square feet, it's made of wood, and it does not have any of these metallic colors or neon or whatever, they bring you a copy of the sign that they propose. If you don't have on file a previous sign copy from that location, they're going to have to file a permit application?
If we have on file, if the sign that they're replacing has been permitted, and the conditions of approval on that permit state that that sign is good for that business only, then that new business owner would need to get a permit, because the conditions of approval of the previous sign indicate that that sign is for that one business only. Going forward, then the following owners would not have to bring this to MHRB.
Why would you do that if the intent of this policy is to make it so that business owners can put up a sign without having to go through the permit process?
Because it was voted on as with that condition.
So you're saying that the condition to the application stays with the application?
That was a previous application. I thought the whole point of this exercise of coming to staff was to make this simple, so that we could say to the public and business owners, signs have to be 6 square feet. They can be any color as long as it's on the historical color palette. They cannot have neon. They cannot have metal. And they have to be hung where signs have been hung. As long as you adhere to those requirements, you will not need a sign permit. That was the idea, I think, and the intent.
Yes, it is. And going forward, should that permit for the previous sign not have that condition that states this sign is good for this business only, then the new business can come in. But as long as that condition exists for that sign, the old one, then the new owner has to come in and do a permit, because it was approved that way by the board.
So let me ask this question, because I know where you're going. Let me ask the question here, you're thinking of it, sure. Previous applications have certain verbiage for the conditioning, and that's always been, stays with the existing business, not the new one.
Sure.
Is there anything we can do as a board to negate that condition?
I don't see a way forward. That was conditioned as such by the board and voted on. I think then there was an appeal period, and if anyone wanted to appeal that condition, they could have appealed the project, but as long as that condition's in there.
So this is one where it says that it's a new business owner. This is what we're trying to get around.
Right, and I can read that condition that forces this new business owner, if that condition is in the permit. This permit for this sign is valid only for as long as this business is conducted at this location.
So the flaw herein is that we had conditions that seem onerous at this point. And so what I understand is that going forward, we can change that, but we can't do it retroactively.
But I don't see us ever doing it retroactively, we're talking about new signs. We're not talking about old signs. We're saying a new sign is proposed, let's use Debbie Lennox's sign as an example. If it didn't have the glass and metal on it, right, if it was this sign without glass and metal, just painted, all she needs to do is come in and apply for a permit, or to give you guys a copy, she doesn't need a permit, and you guys are gonna stamp it, she can hang her sign up.
Correct, but the permit that was there before this sign had in it the condition that said this sign is good for this location only for this business.
But that permit's gone, because that sign is now gone. The old
It is,
business sign is gone.
That was, at any point, any business is going to have a permit. So if a new business comes into town and wants to put up a sign at a new location, and correct me if I'm wrong here, they're going to have at least one permit. That sign will get that permit, then all subsequent businesses, provided that these three conditions that I just read are listed in there, they will not have to go through the permit. They will establish a sign with a size, a color scheme, and then all subsequent signs will need to be similar to that one permitted sign.
That seems extremely complex. I don't think that at all adheres to the motivation of this board, which is to not have us in the business of keeping track of the color and hue of each sign. What if somebody's trying to sell shoes and they have a sign that's white and tan? And I come in and I take the same business and I'm now doing haircuts and I want a sign that's green and wood. We don't want to have to see, they don't need to have to apply for a permit because they're changing the hue of the sign. We just want all the signs in the town to adhere to this code. And I think that's the intent of what we were trying to do. This seems very, very complex.
If I may, I think the signs that have been built in the town over time, and I will say before this condition started being added to permits, I can't remember how many years ago, but it was really to ensure that each MHRD permit was only valid for that one particular sign. And that was, with the agreement of a prior review board, not this current review board. So now what staff is saying, we can't go back and retroactively remove that condition. So what that basically said was that as soon as this business ceases operation here, the permit to have the sign is no longer valid, period. So as if that sign should be removed and not existing there anymore. So what staff is saying is that what we can do is add new conditions going forward that would allow for the replacement of that sign even when the business changes hands. So, and the review board has historically looked at the colors as well as the material of any signage. So it is new to me to hear that the review board would not want to look at the colors associated with the sign, as I believe that's part of what you typically review with the signage.
I thought that at the last meeting what we said was as long as the colors, materials, and size adhered to the code, we weren't particularly concerned about what exact colors were used. Just like the painting of buildings, as long as they're painted to this color scheme that we've outlined, go for it. And it just seems like we've created this new thing. It will get easier, but not a whole lot easier. And why do you have to have a permit to hang a sign in a location where there's already been a sign previously? I don't see the point. And why do we want to issue permits for signs in locations where there have always been signs?
So you're saying the person that wants to put up or wants a new sign shouldn't even go to planning and building services and get their okay?
I think that they should, I think it's fine for them to go in with an 8.5 by 11 copy picture of their sign, and they should be able to say, look, this is the sign I want to put at this location, and as long as it's made of wood, has colors from the historical collection, has no metal or neon on it, planning and building should say, fine, go ahead and put up the sign.
But isn't that what this says?
Almost.
I'm confused.
I know, it's confusing. It almost says that.
It says going forward. So we can't
Where
retroactively.
does it say that it's going forward? It says, prior to sign alterations or copy changes on legally existing signs, business owners will provide PBS with the whole thing.
I think at this part,
So if it's a sign that's there now, and somebody wants to put up a different sign,
Understood and agreed. The issue is that there's certain conditions that were made with an application.
So I think that the line that maybe you're being hung up on is under procedure where it says, the rendering shall, this is the second sentence, the rendering shall identify the sign color, size, shape, and copy, oh sorry, it's the third sentence. Planning staff will determine whether the proposal satisfies regulations or conflicts with NHRB permit conditions.
there's the permit condition.
That's what we're saying.
The previous permit is what they're saying. If it conflicts with the previous permit that was put in for the sign. But why do we need to have that in there? We strike that line out.
well, that's one way of reading it, but I think you could read it in a broader way. I mean, MHRB permit conditions are that, certain size, all the things that are identified in terms of telephone numbers, etc.
It's part two right there, in where you're looking above, because it says, permit conditions that it's similar in color and design to the original sign. So they're going back to the original sign that was permitted in that location, instead of just saying it has to adhere to these specifications. Is that right?
Correct.
So if we struck number 2 from the part above, is similar in color and design to the original sign, so there's no mention of an original sign. There's just signage that is allowed in the town of Mendocino.
I mean, I want to look at the code. I don't believe there's an exemption for new commercial signs. I believe those do need to be reviewed by the review board.
New commercial, what do you mean by new commercial?
I mean, a business in a location that has never previously had a sign.
In a location where there's never been
So
a sign.
if there's a business in town, and let's say, for whatever reason, it was not a business, and it now wants to become a business, and they want to put a sign out there, my understanding is nothing in the chapter that exempts a new sign. That sign has to be permitted, and then all subsequent signs, provided they follow what was permitted by the review board, then they can come to planning and building staff.
Right, but that's in a new location. We were talking about signs that have always been signs.
Yeah, but
Using Debbie Lennox's sign as an example. That location where that post is, there's clearly been signs at that location for a long time. It's a commercial business.
So there is a section, it's under the exemptions in the code, and it really talks about copy changes on legally existing signs provided that the Planning and Building Services Department has determined that the replacement or revised sign, and it goes through the items 1 through 4 on here. So there's not really the authority for us to say you can do whatever color you want. That wouldn't be in line with the exemption that all of this policy is being looked at under.
So the question is, can we, if there were prior conditions that it was a same business and that permit expires when the business leaves, is there a way to get around that? To which history's saying, make it easy, you get a like-for-like replacement, different business. Can we skip over the part that says that the condition is that it has to be with the same business? Is there any way to get past that?
where does it say that? I mean, we're talking, I'm sorry, but we're talking.
It's right
No, I
there.
don't think
It's on the condition of a
similar in
permit.
color and design to the original
Yes,
sign.
The original sign.
The original conditions say that it's only to be with that business. So the question is, how do we strike that and move forward to make it easier for business owners to?
Why do we even care?
I think that,
Yeah,
I don't see it.
you don't see it?
I don't see
I
it.
think
I don't see it.
So this is like
I don't see
this.
the problem.
I think the problem is, there's a permit for an original sign. Somebody took out a permit and it had color and everything was aligned to it.
Right.
So now we're saying, if I want to come to that location and put up a new sign, planning and building has to determine that it complies to the same color and scheme as the original plan, otherwise it comes back to us. And I don't, it seems like we should
Well,
just
if
strike
you-
the original sign thing.
Okay, but I think the problem there is that that's part of the code, isn't it?
That's what I was just going to say.
You know,
cannot
so
strike
I
that
don't
language.
see how we can get away from that. I think we're stuck with that.
Part of the code.
Yeah, I'm
That's,
sorry,
number H, is it?
20.760040H exemptions from MHRD permits. So the only way you get around that is you come get an MHRD permit.
So going forward, we can make it easier on everyone else. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
because of the way the code's written, we can't undo what we've done.
In this particular business that we're presenting today, later, the condition in the previous permit has that this sign is good for this business only.
All of them have that, don't they? Almost all of them in town have that.
Yeah, this would be something long-term going forward. So with this new project, that condition would be omitted, and then 3 new ones that appear on the draft policy have been included. So any subsequent business rather can come in and just run this past planning and building.
So does that mean anybody now trying to implement this new thing is gonna have to pay the $760 for application fee to change
By
the sign?
a signed copy change is actually capped at $250 is the application fee. That was something that we had discussed, I think prior directors that we had worked together to have a reduced fee for a signed copy change or for a single business sign. So it's not $700, it's $250. I think with add-on fees for records maintenance and general plan maintenance, it is 500 something bucks.
And we haven't tried to expedite these so that there isn't a big lag period between application and here.
I know.
My mind is kind of,
We're just trying to clean it up for any future applicants, make it nice on them.
right, no, I get that.
I mean, it seems like we can't do anything retroactive.
And if I may, I'll just comment, the fee is based upon, it's the time it takes for staff to put together a staff report for it, and then for the project, schedule it for hearings, send out notices to adjacent landowners. So it's cost recovery for the work that's being done by planning and building services. And during our last fee update, we chose not to raise any of the historical review board permit fees as part of that update.
So this original code was adopted by the board of supervisors, and that's why we're stuck with it? Is that what I understand?
1995.
Okay, so in 1995, they said this, and now we're stuck with it,
And we're changing it, we're changing it now.
well, we're not really,
What we're saying, what we're saying is that heretofore, if you want to do like for like, you go to planning and building counter, present an 8.5 by 11, pay your fee today, and the next owner doesn't have to do that. They don't have to pay the fee, so long as it's like for like, then they can just have that.
but it's still gonna have to be like for like. So if you have a white and gray sign at this location, it's gonna be stuck as white and gray signs from here into eternity unless you pay for another fee and come in for an application, because of the way that this code is written. Size and color are gonna be locked in, is that right?
That's correct.
So we could open it up, and so you could, I mean, it all depends on where you want the size. If someone wants to come in and do a neon orange,
Well, no, we've eliminated that. We said already that the signs, we said in our proposal, we said that they, will not have neon, they will not have water iridescent, they will not have metal, and they'll be this right square footage, right? We said that in the plan. But for some reason, because of the way that we're interpreting this code, it's kind of invalidating the entire idea of making sign copies simple in the town of Mendocino. We're still tracking what one business's concept was for the sign, saying all businesses from here on out are gonna have to comply with that.
so how do we put guardrails on sufficient so that we don't get something we don't
Well,
want?
we do in the plan already. We say no iridescent signs, no metal, no phone numbers, right? We say all of that right there under the plan. We say what we want. The problem is that
So it's a similar in color, brightness, and tone and hue that is
I think so,
Giving
I think that's the way we're interpreting it, and Holmes was saying we didn't have to interpret it that way, but it sounds like that's how staff is interpreting it.
Yeah.
If I may, this is for just the permanent sign. So if someone wants to do a sign change and that condition isn't in the previous permit, and they want to do it over the counter PDS, that's for the permanent sign. The code does allow temporary signs for up to 2 weeks, I think.
So could we take under the plan, the second bullet point, replacement sign shall be same shape and size, period. Get rid of similar in color, brightness, tone, and hue, leave in the fluorescent, metallic, iridescent, otherwise modern colors. Does that work?
I'm sorry, but I honestly don't think that you can do that, because the code is really specific for the exemption. You have to meet those 4 items at the top here, that is verbatim from the county code. So any policy has to at least fall in line with those 4 items.
Similar in color and design to the original sign.
The original sign.
And now, the colors, I will say, through the years, it has been, like sometimes the previous accent color has become the more prominent color of the sign. That's the type of direction that this review board might be able to provide to staff to give us a bit more leeway with it. So maybe if you had a gray and white sign that had an orange accent within it, and you wanted to create an orange sign with a white accent within it, that could maybe be considered acceptable.
What would we have to do if we wanted to simplify this to the point where we just said, as long as these signs conform to this code, you can just put up a sign? We have to get the board of supervisors to sign off on that?
I'm sorry, which code are you referring to?
The plan, right? We said 6 square feet, made of wood, historic colors, no addresses. You want to put up a sign that looks like that in a location where there have previously been signs, you don't need a permit for that. You just come to planning and building services and you can go ahead. What would we have to do to make that happen?
It sounds like you're asking to want to amend the exemption that's in county code, which would be planning commission, board of supervisors, local coastal program amendment.
Can I raise a point here? This thing says, copy changes on legally existing signs. What's a legally existing sign? If the business is gone, the sign is gone. Is it existing?
Yeah, the sign is no longer existing, but the condition that was written into the permit that permitted it still exists.
How about this? How about if the original sign predates all this? Let's have all the original signs are from the 1920s. So as long as, it's just an original sign.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand.
I'm just saying, if instead of reading the original sign as the most recent permit that was offered up, we just say the original sign is signage for that business that has been there for, some of these businesses have had so many sign changes over the years. Who's to say what the original sign was?
Right, in this case, the original sign would be that sign that was permitted. So in the case of the project this evening, this permit would be the original sign. So all subsequent signs need to follow that color scheme, that size, that material, etc.
But we're talking about a new sign.
Yes.
We're not talking about changing the original sign. We're talking about a new sign.
Right, we have no way of putting up a new sign with new colors and new size unless it comes to the review board. It's just written in the code that way. There's no exemption for that. Only sign copy changes are exempt. And that's what this policy is trying to address, is that section of the code.
Can't the review board delegate its authority to planning and building services?
Well, in a sense, this is what this policy is doing. So if there is a sign copy change, planning and building staff can review that and deem it appropriate if it follows these bullet points in the policy. But if it's a new sign on a business that's never had one, or that previous business had that condition that said the sign was only good for that business, then it needs to come back to the review board. And I don't see a way to.
I'm coming along with this here. It seems to me what we were trying to do here is to say that the review board does not wish to consider signs, new signs, that are very similar to the ones that are already existing in that location, and we're willing to delegate the authority to approve that kind of a sign to planning and building services. Why can't, I don't understand why this can't be drafted in such a way to do that.
We've got to create an exemption to the sign policy which requires new signs get review board, and there's no exemption that says a new sign can't come through.
So I think, yeah, we have to be really clear about when you're talking about a sign copy change, which is changing out the copy on an existing sign versus a brand new sign in a spot that does not currently have an existing sign. Because I'm hearing it a little bit conflated and it's hard to follow.
I would say that we're pretty clear that in a spot where there's not been a sign and there's a new sign being proposed in that location, that would come before the review board. Because that's going to be a rare occasion where a residential property is going commercial or something like that. And that makes sense. But where there's been signs
Well, I
for so many years.
If I may, I think the definition of new sign has two components to it. It's a sign in the business that has never had a sign there before, and a sign that has that condition on it. So if that sign, this existing sign had that condition that said this is good for this business only, the subsequent sign needs to be treated as a new sign.
But we determined that that's most of the signs in the town have
Yes.
that condition. So I think we have to figure out a way to ignore that condition and say that those signs are no longer being used because the business is gone. And so a replacement sign for the incoming business does not need to have MHRB.
If I may, I think what likely we'll need to do as staff is probably ask that this item be continued so we can discuss further and see if we can reach the point that we hear the review board is wanting to get to.
And I think what we're looking for is if there's been a sign and there's gonna be a different sign, that we don't necessarily need to see that we'd love to have you guys handle it. So if you can work with county council and see if there's any way to.
Can I add to that? That if there's been a sign, we don't need to see the new sign, and the new sign doesn't need to follow in the footsteps of the old sign as long as it meets the criteria of the plan. So that it's really clear, we can just simply tell the public, or Rick Sachs, who makes signs, as long as you make a sign with these criteria, you're good.
So I hear you, I'm going to be honest, I don't think we can achieve that because the code is very clear. If it says for an exemption, it has to be similar in color and design to the original sign, which could be whatever signs were previously existing there, but there is no, like staff, we don't have a plan to say if you paint these specific colors, you're approved.
Could we just
have to
say,
look at the previous signs in that location.
could we broaden the definition of original sign to basically being any sign that was made of wood and painted with paint?
In the entirety of the town?
Yeah, those are the original signs. That's how signs have been made in this town for years.
How would staff verify that?
That the
We're
sign
not
is
looking
made,
at the same property.
that the sign is made of wood.
We have thousands of MHRB permits. So you'd be asking for staff to go on a fishing expedition to find colors that would match those signs.
No, I would just ask staff to see the copy change that comes in, and as long as that copy change is made of wood and painted with paint from the historical collection of paints, then it complies to the original sign, because the original signs are wooden signs made of wood.
So,
And that, because what you guys are proposing is that each sign is particular to a location, requires a ton of tracking from staff. If we just say all signs in town,
It's because how the code has been written, and says is similar in color and design to the original sign in the same location on the property as the original sign. and is not larger than the original sign. So you have to have a sign that you are comparing this to, rather than a standard in the code.
Okay, so
That
what
makes
I'm hearing is that we're kind of, our hands are tied from 1995. We've had some great discussion here. I'd like to open it to the public, so if we can do that, and then we can bring it back and give some direction to staff. Thank you. Either or, you guys can introduce yourself, just come up to the podium, say your name for the record, and give us your thoughts. Please.
My name is Rick Sachs, and I've been dealing with MHRD for sign permits since it was in its infancy. Usually there used to be original signs in Mendocino that were made out of metal. I have some in my shop, and those were signs that were long before there was a review board. Since the review board, signs have been requested out of wood. As far as the subject on hand, until Bill Kinzer left the planning department, it was an easy thing for me to walk in with a drawing for a copy change on a sign, same color, same location, same shape and size. And it was an over-the-counter thing that happened right then, and there was no charge for it. And it was understood that this was a sign that had already been before the review board and was approved for that location. Since then, this condition has come up just in the last year or so of the original sign and that it couldn't be replaced without an approval, and it's become very complicated, and the copy change thing hasn't worked at all. I'm curious when you say $250 for the sign, are you talking about for a copy change?
I'm talking about if your project requires a review board permit. Otherwise, if it's an over-the-counter, such as the policy was proposing, there is no fee.
Okay, so that's what I'm looking for. You know, if there's a new sign going in someplace where there hasn't been one, or somebody wants to put up a sign that has a color that's going to be creating, it could be a color creating a feeling that of discord that's on, it could be a color on the historical list that if you put it in this location, it doesn't work. It disrupts the harmony of the community, and if you put it somewhere else, it works. And I think that's where the review board comes in to look at it, to maintain the character of the community. I personally wouldn't like to see anybody be able to put up anything without the review board looking at it. We'd lose control of the town. But to do a copy change on something that was previously approved, that means that the review board has already looked at it and discussed it previously and said, yes, this fits. So now somebody comes along and just wants to have it say something else with the same colors. Should just be a simple over-the-counter, let's do it. But this phrase that has come up about not allowing that to happen, if there was that clause from before, I don't know where that came from, but if it's been there all along, it hasn't been looked at until just the last couple of years. Nobody ever applied that. It was always an over-the-counter thing. So I'd like to see that either people blindside that comment again, or go to Board of Soup and have it removed because it didn't work. And the new plan that Mark is proposing, everything works about it except that one clause, because that one clause means that every copy change that comes up, they have to pay the fee in order to have it done and go through this process one time, and then after that, everybody gets a free ride. So, that just seems very strange. Thank you.
Thank you. This is not about your application.
No,
This is
not
about-
on application, not about the code and your proposed, I actually talked with Mark about
And your
this.
name
My name
and
is Deborah Lennox.
Thank you.
I actually was talking about this with Mark, and where I started was asking if a copy change could happen on another sign that was in the same place for the same business. So what I'm not seeing anywhere is where it says that you have to have, if you have the same business, you can't change your sign. So you're talking about changing from one business to another. And I'm only seeing, what I'm also confused about is that it seems like the conditions of approval are policy, or are they part of the code? Because when I looked in the code about the signs, it didn't have anything about not using the metallic, not metal, metallic colors and iridescent colors and fluorescent colors. So I didn't see that in the code. And so I'm just curious where that particular clause came from, because it's not in the old design guidelines, it's not in the code. And so that's just a question. And then my understanding of what Mark was trying to do here was to keep, so for instance, I'm not allowed to use the Sandpiper as an example, but that is kind of similar, same size sign, same business, similar colors. It would have been nice if she didn't have to pay the permit fee, and we could have done a copy change, because it's not a new sign, it's not a new different position, it's not another business. And if we can change the business and be that same size and shape, that's gravy, that's extra. So there was a couple of different levels of trying to not have to make someone go through this process and take up everybody's time. And I support that fully, and I'm sure the staff could come up with something that everybody would agree complies with the code and helps everybody in town keep their businesses vital. So thank you.
Thank you. Staff want to respond to that one, or?
To the conditions of approval that appear, that was with board discussion over the last few months last night.
I had a comment also.
State your name, sir, please.
I'm Colin Morrow, I'm a local attorney, I have an office in town, and the thing that caught my attention on the draft policy, and I appreciate that you guys are going to kick this around a bit more, is the first bullet point under the plan section as to telephone numbers, web addresses, social media contacts, etc. One, there's no prohibition against that under the sign standards in the code, which is 2712015. And in fact, if you look at other sections of the code discussing signs in town, for example, realtor signs will not have phone numbers. And more broadly, this is actually a First Amendment issue. There's a Supreme Court case from 2015 called Reed versus Town of Gilbert that said that content-based sign restrictions are presumptively invalid unless they survive strict scrutiny, which is very difficult to satisfy. And this is very much a content-based restriction, so you can't have this type of speech within the sign. So I would encourage the board and the staff to look over that and consider further amendments to this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colin?
Yep.
If I may, can I ask you to spell your last name?
Morrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Not today, but tomorrow.
Yes.
Bringing it back to the board, I think if I'm hearing correctly, we want to continue this item and have staff look at it for a couple of different things. I think Colin brings up some excellent points around that we want to get sued, so we don't need to have county council look at that. And I think the intent is to make it as easy as possible for someone who wants to change a sign out, have there been already a sign there that, you know, we would delegate our authority to staff to review it. Am I doing that correctly?
I think so. I mean, we had correction tell us that there's been 30 sign complaints. So the county's running around trying to follow up on these sign complaints. We need to simplify this. It seems like we're pretty close. I mean, we're pretty close, and maybe we just have to end up biting the bullet and making it so that all the new sign applications have to jump through this hoop, and then from there on out, it's going to get better. And that may be the best we're able to do.
I think we ask staff to work with county council to figure out what's possible. I think you understand where we want to go with this.
It's a little bit mind-numbing that we can't change this.
I'm wondering how this differs from what we did with respect to the paint policy. I mean, we delegated that to planning and building services, and it seems rather similar to me.
If I may, Senator Walden, the issue with the county code, very specific exemptions for sign exemptions, where the county code did not have a color or exterior specifications that allows us to be more flexible with the exterior color, where we could get direction from the board and not have to go in front of amending our ordinance at a much higher level. So there's a difference with very specific design guidelines in the Mendocino County Code versus the Mendocino Historical Review Board Design Guideline book. So that's where we were able to help the exterior colors move forward rather than this issue with the signs.
What about the fact that Rick brought up with respect to that portion of the code not being basically looked at until recently?
If I may,
For copy change.
it wasn't the section of the code, it was the condition of approval about the sign being valid only for as long as it was on the property. Because sign copy change, I will say, I worked with Bill Kinzer at the office, and regularly sign copy changes came in over the front counter. And staff would go back and flip through the files and see if we could find a sign that possibly had similar colors and design as that sign, and whether or not we could sign it off over the counter or not. It was a level of workload, but as long as you were focused on the single property where the new sign was proposed, then you were able to look at that history and determine whether or not you could issue a sign copy change approval. So I will need to look through history, how we got to the point, whether or not the condition has changed in what we've put on permits as to why the change may have occurred and how to do sign copy changes. So I think if you're willing to grant a continuance for this item, so staff can work on that, and then also address the First Amendment and free speech concerns that were raised today, because that is certainly something we want to be cognizant of.
We did? That works. Do you need a motion for continuance?
And may I suggest perhaps August? August.
Give you a little bit of time. Do we have a motion?
Motion to continue this question to a future
August.
meeting. Okay.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. Thank you, and thank you, and good luck. Thank you. All right. That was an easy one. Where are
I think you want to go back now in your,
we? Yes.
yes.
So, public hearing 9B, case signature 2023-104 on staff. Planner, please continue.
Thank you.
You're not too Bruce.
Mark Kleiser, Planner 2 for this project. I'd like to note that the agenda notice was incorrect, and it only captured one of the two signs that are being applied for. This is a request to install two signs at 45280 Main Street. Sign number 1 is a 3.5 square foot single face wood sign, painted white background with black lettering and red, blue, green, and yellow accents. The sign copy is going to read DBL Architect. This sign is in the same location as the sign for Wisdom House Gallery, which had that condition of approval saying that that sign was good for that business only. That sign was hung on one post. The DBL sign proposes an additional post that was there previously. It just fell down, and the sign will be situated between the two posts. This sign will be made of wood, with the outer edges painted black and the inside painted white. The word architect will be carved letters painted black. DBL will be crafted in metal with glass accent bubbles, I'm calling them. The metal letters will be placed inside square cutouts of the wood. There will be 3 square cutouts, one for D, B, and L. Sign number 2 is approximately 6 square feet, double-faced wood sign and painted turquoise background with silver lettering and an image of a sandpiper above the copy. The sign will replace the existing sign in its same location. The property is not a historic structure, not on the historic list. Staff requested the review board consider the colors, design, size, and placement and location of the signs. The project conditions were crafted with this draft policy that was just discussed. As such, the condition of approval that typically says the sign is good for this business only is not there, and those 3 new conditions are there. And this concludes my presentation. Any questions?
So real quickly, the 3 conditions are?
Those 3 conditions are, sign copy shall not include telephone numbers, web addresses, references to social media or similar information, which it does not. Replacement sign colors shall be the same, shape and size and similar in color, brightness, tone, and hue. Fluorescent, metallic, iridescent, and otherwise modern colors shall be avoided. Replacement signs shall be in the same location on the property, and this again is for subsequent signs. Alterations or copy changes to approved signs shall be brought to the attention of planning and building services prior to any changes, and that is for future business or Ms. Lennox wants to change the sign.
And you just read through 5, 6, and 7.
Correct.
And if I may, I would suggest, based upon the comments we heard on the prior item, that actually we strike the condition with the telephone numbers and the web addresses and
Number
social
5.
media contacts, yes.
That's where I was going as well. Now, if we need to put that condition in there, I think we can deal with the application without those conditions. So, do we have our applicant present? Would she like to make a presentation? Anything else you want to add?
Okay.
He's going to talk about Santa first.
Okay. Give me your name for the record, please.
My name is Rick Sachs. And Mark, that Wisdom House had 2 posts.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I thought you said 1.
There's only one standing currently.
Okay, well, it was approved with 2 posts.
Yes.
And the sandpiper isn't a copy change, it's a color change. The size, shape, location, and everything is the same. The copy is the same, the only thing that's changing is the color.
Yeah, so I brought in a life-size mock-up of the sign I'm proposing. The colors are actually called billet glass, which is thick glass, it's not stained glass, and they need to be supported by metal, kind of like the cast iron type of metal bracketry that we see all over town. It's the same black, flat matte metal. Those are beach glass colors for the design concept, and the rest of this, 90% of that sign is wood. So and then the windows will be cut out so you can see through. You can see it up here. Some visibility through the letters. If there's any questions.
Thank you. We're going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none.
suggest that that motion is with the omission of condition of approval number 5 as amended.
Yes. All right, and that's pretty straightforward. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None.
Did we have a second?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Ishvi was the first, Paul was the second.
with the omission of condition 5.
Yes. All right, thank you. Go ahead, you did it. Board members, brings us to 11B, now with the sign exemption. We're at 11C, management staff of the urgent ordinance regarding temporary business modifications. They said it was tense, so, Director Broad.
Thank you. Yes, so you've seen my memo and the attachment that has the press release that went out through various media partners on May 10th. So at the review board meeting on May 1st, the review board had asked for staff to, one, provide you a copy of the press release that would be sent out to the public, notifying them of the termination of the urgency ordinance. So as you see in that press release, the date of when applicants will need to come in and file for proper permits is on or before August 8th, 2023. That's 90 days from the date of the press release, and the department did that because the termination date of the urgency ordinance was rather unclear. As you saw described in the ordinance and as you experienced in real time, terminology really changed during the course of the pandemic. And so what we thought was a very clear termination phrasing in the ordinance turned out to be very ambiguous. So that is why we've provided the 90 days from the date of the press release. The second aspect that the review board requested from staff was about what your authority would be in regards to the ordinance and possible extension and or allowance for temporary tenants. So really page 2 of the memorandum goes through the review board's authority. And as you know, the review board, you're really limited in your authority is to review applications for development as described in the code, and I've provided those code sections, to ensure that the development is compatible with and in harmony with surrounding development, will not detract from the appearance of other property within the district, and if applicable, will not unnecessarily damage or destroy a structure of historical, architectural, or cultural significance. And during the review of any application, this review board is well aware, you do have authority to grant some variances to setbacks and building heights. You do not have authority to grant exceptions over lot coverage, but I provided a discussion in here regarding lot coverage, what it includes and what it does not include. And what staff is suggesting is when we look at the history of tents, temporary tents being erected in the town, and I use the McCallum House as an example in here, we have not historically counted when they put up a temporary tent for wedding events towards their lot coverage. So while the county code does not have a definition of temporary, the California Building Code does. And so temporary tents under the California Building Code is 180 days or less. And so it seems, or sorry, excuse me, for a period of less than 180 days. So that 180th day is the really key point. So as I suggested in here, it seems reasonable that tents would not count towards lot coverage if they are erected for less than 180 days. So with all of this said, really the review board has very limited authority over any tents within the town. Your role is really to consider an application that comes before you and determine whether or not that is in harmony with the district. Those 3 findings and criteria that you need to meet, that it will not detract from the historical properties within the district. And then also, like I said, your only real authority for variances comes from either setbacks or building heights.
I have one question. Please. It says right here that Mendocino County Code Section 20.760.045 provides that no tent shall be constructed, installed, or kept stationed on a regular basis in an uncovered visible area in any portion of the historic district. So, after the effective date of the regulations without prior approval of the review board?
Correct. So every single tent in the town of Mendocino requires the approval of the review board. That's why the McCallum House comes before the review board for erecting the temporary wedding tents that they do during the summer months.
Well, what does after the effective date of the regulations mean?
That's the date of the Mendocino Historical Review Board regulation, so that would have been in 1995. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact specific date.
So then what you're saying is that the maximum authority the Historical Review Board has is to be able to allow a tenant to stay up for 180 days?
No, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant to say. So the review board can, I guess, let me start at the beginning. So the review board, this memo is telling you tents require an NHRB permit. There is no exemption from that.
Right.
The review board, what I see become the most common issue, and you've heard it expressed in prior public comment on this, is lot coverage becomes the issue for many individuals who have put up temporary tents. So if there is no lot coverage issue, the review board could decide to allow a tent to remain 365 days of the year, every year in perpetuity. If there is a lot coverage issue, the only way that staff sees to potentially find an exemption around the lot coverage concerns is to have that those tents are only erected for 180 days. And maybe that's during the inclement weather months, and then during the summer months, although I know it's been really foggy lately, maybe then that tent comes down and then it goes back up, in October or something.
Right. Because I'm assuming most tents in the town are going to run into lot coverage issues.
They may very well, and then I will say our office has also been open to, and we've seen this on several other properties, many sites are non-conforming in terms of their lot coverage. So you can maintain the current level of lot coverage that you have, you just cannot increase it. So some individuals have chosen to remove improvements that count towards lot coverage in replacement of building something else on their property.
So let me ask you this question. If we're looking at a situation like Patterson's Pub, which I believe,
It's going to come before you next month.
okay, the land that is to the south of Mendoza's that has the tent over it is Mendoza's land? Market, is that correct?
Yes. Mr. Grant.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how does that work in terms of lot coverage when it's a separate parcel?
We would look at the lot coverage on the parcel upon which it is located. If they set up a shared use agreement, that's between the two owners.
So it would be Mendoza's Market that would be coming forth for that use because it's their land?
Potentially, but I believe they have authorized
Right.
Tony to act as their agent.
Okay.
I'm their agent, also the lessee.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just curious how this all works out because
Yeah,
there's so many
absolutely.
different.
We look at lot coverage on a legal parcel basis, so we don't combine multiple legal lots.
Okay.
The Mendoza property consists of several parcels, one of which is where the tent is located, plus part of the market.
What's the question for us?
There was no question, you had asked for a memo, and so I prepared a memo for you. It's informational only, and I'm available to answer any other questions.
Do you guys have any questions for her?
Well, the whole thing is fascinating, and it seems to me that prior to the pandemic, we would never have considered agreeing to permanent tents in Mendocino. We've gone through this many, many times over the years. For my part, I appreciate the commercial arguments in favor of the tents, but I don't think that's our role. Our role is not the commercial promotion of Mendocino, but actually the historical preservation of Mendocino. And so I think the question for us is whether the tents are compatible with and in harmony with the surrounding development and will not detract from the appearance of other property within the district. Now, Julia has suggested that we could consider providing guidance on what kind of improvements may be considered harmonious with the historic district and consistent with our design guidelines. And that's certainly something that we could look into. But she's also mentioned that the tents may be in violation of the maximum lot coverage requirements of the county, which is something that we don't have control over. And she's noted that, you know, PBS has counted temporary tents has not counted temporary tents toward lots coverage. And as she mentioned, temporary is less than 180 days. So to my mind, there are several things we need to look into here. One is from the sewer district, to hear from them regarding the issue of increased water use. I think we need a definitive decision from the county on the lot coverage issue. And at this point, it appears to me that we would be limited to granting a temporary extension of 180 days in view of that lot coverage issue. And certainly we need to decide what kinds of structures are harmonious with the historic district and consistent with the design guidelines. So, and also, I still maintain we should look at this on a case-by-case basis.
If I may, I think you are required to. Each tent will need to come in for approval, and so you will be looking at this on a case-by-case basis. There is no way to do an overarching policy to grandfather in all tents.
So, I personally don't think that permanent tents are consistent with the preservation and the character of Mendocino. But there we are. I think we need to look at several issues. So, I mean, we're obviously not making a decision on any of this today, but I think those are some items that we and the staff need to look into for future discussion and decision.
I think also if you guys, are you guys gonna talk to the sewer district as well and try to figure out how to integrate these two issues so that applicants are able to figure out all the hurdles that they're going to have?
For applications in the town of Mendocino, we typically require that they come in with a letter from MCCSD, the City Community Services District, specifying that they have all their proper entitlements in place for that going forward. Property owners are really encouraged to contact the sewer district as soon as possible. I did receive correspondence from them recently, unrelated to this particular agenda, just asking that there be collaboration in ensuring that planning and building does not approve something that has not received the proper approval from the Community Services District, because it's both the groundwater extraction component and the sewer district capacity component. So, you know, if any owners are listening and they have not worked with the MCCSD on the work that they have done, they're highly encouraged to do so, because the reality is it could be a loan that they can't obtain what they need to from MCCSD, and really there would be no purpose in coming forward because they wouldn't be able to actually realize the development. But again, it's a case-by-case basis, so every property is going to be under a different level of scrutiny. There's no overarching or excuse me, I should say scrutiny will be the same, but a different set of circumstances.
I have one quick question, and I totally agree with what you said this evening. I listened to, I'm sorry I missed the last meeting, I did listen to a lot of I listened to the entire part of the whole, this piece last month. And I heard lots of business owners saying that they employ the local people, which is great. And that if they didn't have the tent, they would have to cut a bunch of their staff. And so it comes to my mind, are they operating within their means of water allotment. So it's a big question I have. One of the questions I do have though is, for lot coverage, is there any part of the county that can grant a variance to allow someone to put up a permanent structure that would, if MHRB could say, yeah, it's design and character, is there anyone within the county structure that could say, yes, we can waive that lot coverage variance?
There actually is no variance from lot coverage.
There's no variance from it?
There is no variance you can request from it. No body, other than amending the code outright, there is no body that can approve an exception to the lot coverage standards. So what's really key, and this is what really I want property owners to focus on, because I think this is where some folks get it a little confused, because lot coverage is differently described in the town of Mendocino than it is in any other division of the county code, I will tell you. So it's challenging for our staff as well. So lot coverage means the percentage of gross lot area covered by all buildings and structures on a lot, including decks, porches, and covered walkways, excluding uncovered required parking areas, landscaping, patios, terracing, and rainwater, groundwater, or potable water storage tanks. So all parking areas, landscaping, at-grade patios, all of that is exempt. So it's really trying to focus on more of the actual structures that you have, including decks, where you have something that's elevated above the ground. I think the goal was to only count things that are in some way elevated above the ground.
So, and that's code, county code?
That's county code.
And to amend that, the board of supervisors has the authority to do that?
Anything in the town of Mendocino regulations, you start with the planning commission, who makes a recommendation to the board of supervisors, who adopts an ordinance and directs staff to submit a local coastal program amendment to the California Coastal Commission, and then you go through the certification hearings with the California Coastal Commission.
It seems like we should get that process started, because it hasn't happened since 1995, and we're running into all kinds of issues. And the longer we kick this can and our hands are tied by 1995, that's not good for us. I think we should get that going.
Well, I appreciate that comment. Actually, the town of Mendocino regulations were updated in 2017. At that time, for whatever reason, it was not chosen to, the decision was not to update the historical review board requirements at that time. So that code remains the same from 1995 with minor tweaks in terms of some of like the application and fees and things like that. But really the bulk of it remains entirely intact. So that was a decision made in 2017, and prior to that, that was a 6-year update process. It started in 2011, had a lot of community meetings and community input. And I will tell you, so the Board of Supervisors directs the department's work plan and what we work on. We are currently embarking on a local coastal program update for the bulk of the coastal zone, which hasn't been updated since 1992 when it was originally adopted. That's a 3-year process, so conceivably our staff, I'm just going to say bluntly, we don't have the capacity to do an update to the town of Mendocino regulations until after, at minimum, we complete that work. So at least 3 years out.
So lot coverage will not get addressed for at least 3 years, and probably 10.
Hopefully not 10. I think there was some mishaps that happened with the Mendocino town update. It got derailed in a couple different areas, and I really think it could have happened quite a bit faster. But as an example, when we had something that was meant to be streamlined with the commission as well, it was our accessory dwelling unit regulations for the bulk of the coastal zone excluding town of Mendocino. We started that in 2019. We got certification in 2021. That was a fast update. That was 2 years.
And I remember from prior Board of Soups meetings when you came up and you talked about short-term rentals. Is that part of the code update that you were talking about?
Short-term rentals in the inland area of the county
Yes.
as part of the code update. Yes, correct. Yeah, you have yes, at that board meeting. The town of Mendocino has some very strong short-term rental regulations, and those were really built during that 2017 update process, and a strong desire was expressed from the community to see that this be less vacation home rentals and people actually living, they wanted to see a residential character and people living in the historic district rather than short-term or vacation home rentals. Lots of history.
Any other questions for staff? I guess I should open it up to the public. Does anyone from the public please come to the podium, state your name for the record?
Good evening. I guess I'm the culprit of this agenda item.
Name for the record?
Tony Graham, Patterson's Pub.
Thank you.
I'll be on the agenda for your July meeting. Or is it August or July?
July 10th.
July.
Yes.
Is there anything you want from me that I can prepare for in anticipation of the meeting? I've already dealt with the water issue and completely in compliance. As a matter of fact, well below all the allocations that the sewer board has put on me. Is there some other issue that you would like me to address at the next meeting that you can think of?
Our hands are tied. We can only tell you what staff is going to help us with findings. We have to make certain findings to approve. If we can't make the findings, we can't approve. So we're all about the historic district and the appearance thereof.
Okay, I'll be working with staff to have a meeting.
I mean, it seems like to me that the easiest solution is to go for a series of temporary approvals. Because it seems like our board is able to basically overlook the design criteria of the historical element for 180 days at a time, up to 180 days. So in each bite, we can do that. To approve a tent for a period longer than 180 days, from a historical standpoint, I think would be difficult. I kind of concur with Holmes that would be, as much as I want to encourage tents, I think that would be a difficult pill to swallow as a historical review board. But 180 days at a time, I wouldn't see it. Personally, I wouldn't see a problem.
My tent was for 2 years, and it was due to the pandemic.
Right.
Now it's expired, and I'm reapplying. And again, I'm not looking for long-term solutions here. What I'm looking for is a way to continue my business for the foreseeable future because of the pandemic. And I don't know if you know about the Chronicle COVID following program, but we still have a lot of live cases here in Mendocino County, both deaths and live COVID cases. And half of my staff would prefer not to be inside, would prefer to be outside. So I'm trying to manage several moving pieces here. And so for the moment, I do want to continue the tent. Not on a permanent basis, obviously. I mean, that's a silly structure to have on a permanent basis.
I guess that's what I'm saying, is if your application was for 180 days, I don't see a problem personally.
Okay. And if I may, this application is coming forward, a condition was added on that permit that specified that the review board could extend the term of his permit upon a written request. So it's not a new permit request, it's actually just coming to seek your additional authorization to continue the tent it's operating.
Okay.
Well, if there is some concern, please relay it on. I'll be happy to address it at the next meeting. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else from the public? Anything from the board? All right. Thank you. I think that brings us up to our last one, which is the matters from staff. Am I correct? Number 1B. Case via 2023-0261 building permit. Lawrence Solar. Planner Walton, please.
Planner Walton, to present to you today, we received, Mendocino County Planning and Building Services received a building permit application to install roof mount solar on 2 accessory structures on the parcel located at 44797 Main Street. A memo has been prepared for you today where the parcel itself does have a Category 1 historical resource, like the Len Bernard house, sorry about that. The proposed roof mount structure, roof mount solar systems are not on the Category 1 historical building. And if you would like to, so I got ahead of myself. Planning staff found it would be appropriate to place this project on the agenda today for the review board to confer and provide comment. Within the packet that you received today, there is a site plan that shows where the proposed solar panels will be located, and staff printed out some current street view images to show you the location of the building on Main Street. Here is an image. You should all have copies of this printed out on your tables in front of you today. I have one that's looking towards the ocean down Main Street where you can see the Presbyterian Church beyond. And there are the roof edges behind this hedge, and the solar will be opposite the opposite roof. There's also a color aerial image showing you where the roof, or where the, to kind of connect where the solar panels are going. And staff is presenting this to you for your comments and is prepared to answer any questions that you have.
My understanding is for our information only, basically. We was talking about solar before, so.
You can offer recommendations or critique, but we can't say no. So, like what we've done in the past is one of my favorites was the one on Ukiah and Howard Street. There's a front corner house and there's the building behind it. And they proposed solar panels and they left out one in the center. So it looked kind of funky, and so could you make it a full array and move the stovepipe, and they did, and that's great. So that's the kind of direction we can offer, but it's not up or down, it's just a comment.
And in this case, it strikes me that these structures we're talking about are pretty much below the level of Main Street, and they're not very visible at all, so I don't have a problem here.
Public, any comment?
Sounds great.
Let's go.
Thank you, staff. I guess the comment is, it's going to be out of view of the public for the most part, and thank you for bringing it forward to us. Which brings us to, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
To our next meeting, which is July 10th.